Oh, you have to press the button.
Oh, sorry. Hello. Yeah, it's working. So I want to thank the organizers and everybody. I have to tell to the distance audience, especially the one who will look at it in podcast, that presentation in the morning were wonderful and fantastic, but also obliged me to completely rewrite down my talk in order for it to be rather complimentary rather than saying the same thing over and over again. So this is, I hope, not too much a mess, especially as I'm trying, in a sense, to sum up 8 years of work that I've been doing with my colleague David Ponty on different topics on the political economy of academic publications towards the kind of angle that was asked. And I'm trying to do it in limited minutes, of course. And you will have a list of presentation, as I suppose all the slides will be available later. So basically, I'm going to tell you 3 stories. A very short story, history of bibliometrics, another one on ranking, ratings, and journal lists, and the third one on peer review models. And for each of them, I will try to sum up the kind of historical evolution you see in different academic communities. And then my point would be on the changes or non-changes that the open access movements, I use the plural now that you've seen the morning, into these different tools and instruments. So let's begin with bibliometrics. The most important slide is here. Bibliometrics, you have to understand, is a mix of 3 components. The first one is algorithms. An algorithm could be just a sum, 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, could be a ratio, could be very kind of advanced mathematical stuff. The other thing is a database. You need to have a database in order to make bibliometrics on what kind of journals, articles, references, or whatever are you going to use to do what? To use a bibliometric tool, which is the kind of the intertwining of the algorithm and the database. Once you have understood that, the rest of the talk on bibliometrics will be really easy. So if you look at bibliometrics, probably one of the first algorithm in biblioeconomics was presented by Gross and Gross in 1927 and then by Bradford in 1934. So the idea is basically that you're counting the citations within the references of a series of journals that are in the library. What is the aim of that? The aim of that is to determine whether certain journals are more important compared to others. And Bradford invented, I have to correct Jean-Claude, invented the term core journals. So he found the power distribution among journals and would say, okay, if you want to have, let's say, 80% of the references, then you just have to use this range of journals. And that was really important at a time where paper were taking lots of places into the libraries. And so it was not only a question of cost, but also a question of location and finding places to put them into the libraries. Of course, there's a long tradition. For example, Reisig has done this kind of algorithm, which is, in fact, a definition of what is a good journal. This definition, so you divide the total number citation by the number of articles. It's not the good one. So Reisig, what he was doing is, I have to find for every article that has been published, 1 citation at least. A good journal is a journal in which every article is then further cited somewhere. So that means if you have only 10% of the papers that are cited hundreds of times, I don't care. I want every paper to be cited, which is, of course, a view of a journal in which supposedly each article is of quality. So Garfield and Scher used that in order to invent the very famous journal impact factor. So what basically these people are doing is find formulas in order to say, this is the way we shall count things. which is very different, of course, from making databases like the Science Citation Index, which has been described in the morning, and even much more on doing bibliometric tools, which is the Journal Citation Reports, which was first published in 1975 as an appendix to the Science Citation Index. And what you're doing basically here, you find the same formula. That is, we just rank the journals based on the total number of citations. The more citations you have, the better it is. Gross and gross 1927. But then you have another column here, you know, strange numbers, 4.385 and so on. This is the journal impact factor, which was just one algorithm, and that was not important because, as you can see, the journals are not ranked like this. But what changed is that this first column disappeared through time, while the second column became more and more important. I shall correct or amend the Jean-Claude Stock, not by the power of the instrument itself, but because publishers and journals and editors used it in order to show that their journal were the most important because they had the biggest impact factor. And it began, not surprisingly, with annual reviews. Annual reviews publish, as you know, probably most of you, and review articles. Not original material, but review article. And we know we have been knowing for a long time, they are quoted a lot. Why? Because instead of making the literature, then instead of having 351 papers, you take the review paper and you cite it. And you say, okay, this guy has done the work, it's enough. This woman has spent 2 years to read all this literature. I'm going to spend her work, and you know, we think all about cumulative knowledge into science. Let's say from 1995 on, the journal impact factor has been criticized more and more. The kind of criticism that could come from the inside of scientometrics communities, like this beautiful paper, Lavia and Jangra, what basically they're showing is that they find into a database what they call duplicate papers. They say the same authors, the same number of references, the same title. So it should be the same paper. It has been published in Journal A and Journal B. And I'm looking at the references. And what is happening is, of course, the more important the journal impact factor is, the more citations of let's say, paper A in compared to paper B you have. So basically you have what's called Matthew effect on the journal itself. So it's not the question of quality. It's the fact that you could say it has more readership for whatever reason, but you have an effect of this measurement. Another example, which is really, really fun and interesting, this is a Lausanne-Rivière-Gingras paper. So basically what they've been doing is having a mathematical relation between the mean, the impact factor, and the distribution of citations. Of course, we know it's a very bad relationship because it's a power distribution. So the mean is really a bad indicator. But what they've done is plotting through time this. And you see a curve like this. It goes up and up and up until the 90s, and then it goes down. And the idea, which is a very important one, is that why is it going down? Because more and more journals are not read as, you know, an issue on paper, but articles are read separately because they're available on separate web pages or PDFs or whatever. And so, in a sense, readers don't see it as part of a journal, but rather as an individual component. You have tons and tons of criticisms of the impact factor, which is not the whole bibliometrics. I'll come to that in a moment. So I'll just keep that. Of course, from the 2000 on, we leave TINA. So this is not anymore Margaret Thatcher's world in which there is no alternative. And, okay, this measurement is just bullshit, basically, but we don't have any alternative. The alternative begins with the idea, come back to the definition of bibliometrics, of new databases. So Elsevier is coming with Scopus, and Google is coming with Google Scholar. one thing that is important here is that you have a start to opening of, let's say, not the data, but the results. The Elsevier strategy was that the data is still proprietary, but the results are available. You can cite them, you can work on them, and so on. And of course, Google, you know, the thing that is, we don't know exactly what is the database, but you have some kind of access. And the other effect is that this is probably most of you are familiar with that. This is publish or perish. Not the phrase, but the tool. It was made by Arzing, I don't remember her first name, A. Arzing. She's working in Australia. She's a management professor in university. And basically what she's done is use an algorithm, the new trendy algorithm, which is the H-index. I won't get into it. The database of Google, and you have a small program running on Windows, and you can use it. So suddenly, bibliometrics is not a question of librarians, scientometricians, or institutions, but you can make your home bibliometrics. Just like, you know, you're having your cooking machines and you can do stuff that only restaurants used to do, you can do the same at home. And everybody can then use that, which is very important because the idea that then data should be available in some way or another gets into the picture, and you got this. And something else is happening, that is the popularity of open repositories has an effect on some of them. This is REPEC. If you don't know it, go on it. Economist lives in a world in which, you know, open access, APC, all that, you know, it's over. Every working paper not published by, produced by an economist is on REPEC years after it would be published or not, just before, of course. It would be published or not. And they're using bibliometrics on it. You can have top items by citations, by top series, for example. Any kind of algorithm could be used. And of course, you got people working, looking every day whether they are the 1,251th economist in the world ranked by that algorithm, or if their ranking has gone higher because of this and that. And of course, working papers are citable, and working papers now, if you find a published article in economics, most of the references are working papers, not published articles. Plus one, so we're getting into the open access movement, as you can see. Plus one has also tried to implement what they call article level metrics. So they say, we don't believe in journal power. We don't believe that measurement should be applied on a journal at the level of a journal, but should be applied at the level of the article. So you can find individual citations, but also views and also social networks citations and comments from readers. So the idea is that every article should be treated alone as far as, let's say, quality, impact, or whatever is concerned. So this is the main kind road that happened in the open access movement. But another one has happened recently, and won't go into that. This is the open citations movement, which started in England as a funded project. So the whole idea is that now we talk about open access all the time, but the data from the citation and references, which are very important both for bibliographic reasons and to make really like pictures of the evolution of science, is not available. Not available in a sense you have to pay for it, you can't discuss it, and so on. So basically you have a movement that say to the publishers, you have to free your data. Just like we were saying to them, you have to free publications and articles. Now you have to free your data. And not surprisingly, most of them have done it except Elsevier, who has Scopus. That is, you say, oh, I've done the database, I won't give it to you now. So bibliometrics has been changed by the open access movement in the sense of getting to articles, having different kind of measurements, and asking for open citations. Let's skip to the second. Oh, DORA, very important, which is something. So DORA is a declaration that is against the impact factor, but that states that we need to eliminate the use of journal-based metrics. So basically, it destroys the journal as an entity as far as quality, whatever, is concerned. So this is really radical in a sense. Okay, journals don't matter as far as quality is concerned. Second tool, journal rankings. So what is a journal ranking? Basically, it's people that do this kind of thing. That is, they have a list of journals and they're trying to put them in categories. They're trying to rank them, to rate them, to put lists in them. It's a movement that happened in many different countries. We've been studying it in Norway, in Australia, in Europe, in France, in Belgium, and so on. And the main idea is really, so you have different looks of the list. The main idea is really to have an alternative to journal impact factors, both because they don't cover a lot of different journals, and two, because of a criticism I've said. So they say, we rather have experts panels and organizations, evaluation organization, mix in order to make something that is reasonable, compared to having a machine done by US companies with all their biases. So then, sorry for the translator, there's a lot of text, but don't translate it in the next 3 or 4 slides. They have different definitions of what is quality for a journal. So you have an intrinsic definition of high quality. You're supposed to have international academic standards. So you have basic publishing standards, and here you can see the ISSN as an example. But then, do you do a comprehensive list or a selective list? It doesn't tell you a thing. But you have also 2 other definitions of what is a quality. You have a procedural definition. That is the idea that within the editorial practices, you can find things that give you quality. You're supposed to have authors from top institutions, acceptance rate, and different stuff that separates them from the rest. It's supposed to be standards. Of course, if you look at them precisely, you don't see any standard at all. But you have also a relational definition of quality. Basically, you're making quotas. You're saying in different organizations, okay, A is just 10% of the journals or 25%. And of course, if you want to have a long list of journals, what you do basically is you have a total number of journals, but it goes to thousands and tens of thousands. And then your A list, of course, is still big compared to other ones that's supposed to be more selective. And of course, all the time when you use journal rankings, the problem is not the A definition. The problem is the C, D, E, whatever definition. That is, what is the rest? So in the Web of Science, the rest is just non-worst journals, it's supposed to be crappy. C, it's supposed to be, it depends. It's good, but it's not excellent. It's, there was one ranking with stars. And they say, it's just like the Michelin guide. 1 star could be worth for lunch. So that's the whole idea of, 4 stars is 4 stars, okay, but 1 star is, it's nice. It's a nice place to be. Don't expect the same thing, but it's a nice place to be. What has happened with the open access movement? I won't talk about Sherpa Romeo, which has been talked about in the morning, but I'd look at DOAJ. And at the beginning, this is coming from Web Archive. It's a very inclusive list. The idea is really to give people a list of the journals in which, if they want to, they can publish as open access journal. So you can see, if you look at the vocabulary, pay attention, preferably, it's always about recommendation. So it's something that is nice, that is inclusive, and they want to have, let's say, the most important list, the biggest number of journals. But then something happens. the blacklist of Jeffrey Bills. It has been talked also in the morning. Basically, it's the opposite of the excellence lists. But this is, I say blacklist because it was used really in consumerist movements. Like this is the blacklist with GMOs or whatever you can find in it. So this is the blacklist. Don't go there. It's bad. It's not a sign of quality. It's a sign of whatever, murkiness. So he's done it. Lots of papers in Nature elsewhere. And then he treated Cielo as, the favela place, the place where you have like stinking journals and so on, which led, of course, to the question of, whether it was Western, North, or traditional, let's say, biased toward this kind of journals. But the effect was that the DOAJ changed its criteria because people in the board wanted their tool to be considered as serious, and so it was less inclusive. And you can see in red, this is important, basic requirements for inclusion. So you got a list of criteria that are just compulsory. So it's not friendly or recommendation anymore. It's like you have a limited list. More than that, they invented the seal. So you have a kind of green stamp on it, and the important part is at the bottom. No seal does not mean low quality, non-peer-reviewed, questionable, dodgy, scammy. So this is once more not a question of quality. It's the question of, let's say, the adherence to their view what is open access, for example, having a CC license and all that stuff. So that's the kind of towards this tool, that's the kind of movement that made the open access. That is, we want to have other criteria to rank or list the journals. Third, instruments, and I'm going faster. Peer review. So peer review, I'm going to make 350 years in just one slide. So one of the questions is, who's judging peer review? As you know, and look at the historians' work like Aileen Fifth and so on, and Alex Sizer and so on. So we've come from editor-in-chief, the invention of editorial committee, and then reviewers, referees appeared through time. All these people, this is not like historical in the sense of an evolution that goes from one step to another. It happened in some places, but not in other. A very famous example, that is Einstein coming from Germany when there was no referee to America because of Nazism. Sorry. Because of Nazism, and discovering that someone non-authorized by him read the paper. So for him, it was just completely strange. It was like getting your paper, in a sense, public before it was certified by the editorial board or the editor itself. You can find things like that. So this is the end of the 19th century. Don't read it. Basically, it's the British Medical Journal that explains that every line has to be read by an expert in the field. So referee is just the cornerstone of scientific journals. If you go forward to the 1970s, you can see the editor of The Lancet, of course, a commercial journal, would say, no, this is bullshit. This is bigotry. Like, I can judge whether a paper is good or not. I can do it alone, but I'm giving you the answer in 5 days instead of 5 weeks or 5 months. So this is really interesting and important. So this is not like what I want to give you an impression of. This is not like peer review is in any way, I shall say, unified, or there are gold standards. Gold standards exist in one journal at one time. And so you have inventions all the time, like companies, Publons, I will go over it. And you got tensions, you got lots and lots of books on peer review. You've got tension within the reviewing. So what is the role of the reviewer, what he is supposed to do? Do you give him like ticking boxes, comments, or shall he or she just write down what he thinks of a paper? This is the same thing with editorship. Are editors just like reviewers or managers, and so on and so on. And the last line is important, excellence versus quality control. So we come back to raising, that is it like every paper is quality, or I shall need the excellent paper, whatever it means. And if some are not excellent, I don't care. I want excellent ones. If you go to the open access movement, PLOS ONE was probably the first one to describe peer review as a barrier in a different way than the guy of the Lancet. That is, we want written down papers that are just good quality, sound science to be published and readable by everybody. That's the basic argument. So all these things about quality, importance, scope, whatever, I don't care. It's so they made the mega journal in PLOS ONE and do it. That's one thing. The other thing is that you have two papers on that. The importance of open peer review, which was really, I wouldn't say a minority, but almost non-existent before 1985. And they say we have to be transparent. So sign reviews, discussion between everybody, and so on. So the openness within the procedural, the editorial procedure becomes one thing that is really important compared to supposedly objectivity of a double blind. Finally, post-publication peer review is another invention of the open access movement in some sense, because, you know, in humanities and social sciences, book reviews, for example, are post-publication peer reviews, and they've been existing for centuries. So one example, very famous one, 1000, in which, let's say, the papers are published first, in a sense, become public, and then they are judged by people, and of course, you see the referee reports, versioning the papers, and so on, it has been explained. Another example of post-publication peer review, it's a paper small paper, we've been publishing last year. A published article is not certified forever anymore. Standard editorial practices comes with now expression of concerns, corrections, and retractions. That is, there is life after the publication of a paper, not in a sense only of citations or criticisms, but the status of the papers are as part of the scientific literature is changing through time, or could change through time. And finally, I won't come into that, but of course, the pub-peer effect and the commenting in post-publication peer review, all these ideas of the scientific debate and scholarly communication doesn't stop with publication. In a sense, it starts with publication. And of course, I'm almost over. That means that suddenly readers as a collective are seen as judging instances. As citers, as commenters, or as sharers. They are part of a process of valuing and evaluating a paper. This is really, really, really important within not only the open access movement, but as a more general movement. Basically, the wisdom of a crowd is seen more important than the expertise of 2, 3, 5, or 7 people. With this little problem, which is you can fight against Trump. This is coming from a demonstration against Trump, of course, but if science is more murky and less stable than, let's say, non-academic people think it, then maybe we have a problem. Conclusion, last slide. Yeah, I'm almost on time. It's incredible. 8 years in 30 minutes. So the political economy of open access publication. It has been said in the morning there are different open access. And the question is, what are the objectives of these different open access? You can try to transform the economy of knowledge, or simply to say, I want to make the knowledge available. You can change the money equation or keep it safe in the same pockets. If you're, let's say, Netherlands, maybe the thing that a Dutch company, a British Dutch company that has lots of money is not a problem. If you're from Brazil, France, or Congo, maybe this is a problem. Changing the publishing model, we've seen that, especially in the third part. versus reinforcing journal peer review and other supposedly gold standards. Bill, whatever his, let's say, intentions and backgrounds would be part of a movement in which saying, you know, scientific publications work well, while the other guys in front of it would say, no, all these crises, all these fakes, all this retraction show that something bad is going on, and we have to change it. Of course, we can invent new devices, and when I say device, I say non-journals, things that do, you know, scholarly communication, but that are not journals or articles, or we can support legacy journals because we think it's really important into the science project. And finally, and that was the aim of that talk, you can think within the open access publication movement, you have to transform evaluation models based on open science, like the Directory of Open Access Journals, or you can say science careers work quite well. And we want to keep it traditional rather than having like fashion about that paper because it has been on a newspaper, or the fact that these people have connections in China or elsewhere, and this is really bad because they just have number of people that they are not, let's say, qualified people. So you can see with this stake of evaluation, all the different dimensions of open access are involved. And depending on what you want to do, then you change the whole world or you keep it the same way. Thank you.
Thank you, Didier. I think we have time for perhaps a couple questions before we move on to Leo Vios's presentation. So we have a microphone. So Regina? Oh, where is the microphone? Oh, it's there. It's up there.
So I'm wondering about the last slide that you showed with these dichotomies, and if there really isn't a middle ground, which I'm suspecting you could agree with, I don't know, you tell me, between keeping the best of traditional models, there may be some good parts, and then using more open science principles. In other words, I don't necessarily think we have to throw out everything we have right now.
Sorry. The idea of having 5 different lines is precisely the fact that depending on the actors, they want to change some part of it and keep the rest. So it really depends on the kind of leverage they want to have, what kind of scholarly communication view they have, and so on. You can, for example, say that the gold APC model adopted by commercial publishers keep the best and gives you only what is the most important thing, that is making knowledge available and reusable on the Budapest Open Access Initiative definition. That's an example. And you keep, that's nice, you keep the journal impact factor, you keep all the money in the north, you keep all the reviewers in the north while complaining that, oh, it's so hard to find reviewers, but never said to an Indian or a Chinese colleague that, of course, oh no, these people, oh no, we want to have, you know, like very sure people, you know, like basically, or I mean, all boys club, basically, but we complain about the reviews. So that's the whole idea of these different lines, that is, each component is linked to the other, but some actors are trying to dissociate them. Like PLOS is making a journal, accepting to be finally having an impact factor, while at the same thing saying every article has to be treated differently. So it's the kind of mix. The whole idea is to say, as it has been said in the morning, there are different kind of open access. But what I'm pointing at is that there are different aims at different people. And they are using different technologies, tools, arguments in order to fulfill them.
Okay, thank you. I think if there was one that I would want to absolutely change, it is the publish or perish model. I have a daughter who's a researcher, and she's caught in the publish or perish trap, which I think is actually driving the stability of the subscription model? Thank you.
I shall say that on this specific topic, I think that almost everybody agree while doing always the same in order to complete it, except in some disciplines like maths and so on. And you know, the people that say we have to go to articles that are not certified, everybody and so on, they would say that we're getting into a kind of web economy, economy of attention. That is, on what basis do you actually read a paper? And they would have this hope that based on TDM and others, because of the topic itself, because of the content itself, you don't look at the offers, you don't look at the institutions, at the countries or whatever, you're searching for content. In the end, I don't know whether it's true or not. And what everybody agrees on is that maybe in practice they do that. But when you get in front of a committee, promotion, recruitment, whatever, then things go differently because people don't have time to read. So this is really something that is tricky in a sense. You don't know exactly on what buttons to push in order to change that big equation. You have people who would say we have to publish less. You have seniors that have to give examples. You got all those people, for example, that say, I won't publish anymore in Nature. Once you're 55 and you have a lab of your own and so on, okay, you can say it, but what about young people? And still people, postdocs in your lab are going to publish in Nature, Science, or whatever, BMG, Lancet, or whatever. So it's very tricky. I didn't put it on that because I think that almost every actor would agree with you on that, except nobody would agree on the solution, and nobody would actually, I'm not sure, and I'm not sure if even two things. One is it's not sure that the publish or perish exists. In a sense, I come to a paper by Lariviere and other authors that say the individual productivity of researcher has not changed in a century, but the number of scientists has just exploded and co-authorship has exploded. So that's one thing that is tricky with this idea of a crisis of a number of papers. And the other thing is that then if you put away numbers, you come back to quality based on journal. That is like the ref in England, just give me your 20% of your production. Give me 5 papers. And it has been shown over and over again, people won't choose the paper that are the most important to them. They would choose the paper that have been published or books in the most prestigious journals or editors.
Thank you.
Okay, I think in the interest of time, maybe we will turn over to Dr. Vios for his presentation now, and then maybe there'll be time to ask questions